Hey there, folks. My name is Misadventurer, and today I'm going to talk about the historical accuracy of the 2013 grand strategy / real-time strategy game Total War Rome 2's 2014 DLC campaign, Wrath of Sparta. Now, Wrath of Sparta is the first high-profile, high-budget gaming experience of the modern age of gaming, which has a Peloponnesian War scenario at its core. I don't want to necessarily say for sure that there's not been Peloponnesian War gaming experiences before Wrath of Sparta, because I'm sure there have been and I'm just not familiar with them. They would probably be with older strategy games. But either way, the Peloponnesian War is a topic I have a lot of experience with. If you don't know, I am the developer of an Imperator Rome mod called Hegemony, which is also a Peloponnesian War grand strategy campaign scenario. So I've spent the last year and a half almost working on that project and doing a ton of research to try to make it as historically accurate as possible. And my first exposure to this setting was, in the form of video games, was with Wrath of Sparta. So this is definitely a nostalgic topic for me, the one I am completely ready to go off on, because from what I remember about Wrath of Sparta, it does have some historical inaccuracies in some unusual ways. I will say, compared to the other high-profile Peloponnesian War video game, which of course is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, we're talking about a scale of historical accuracy where one of them, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, is essentially at the center of the Earth, and this one is at the edge of the universe in terms of the difference in accuracy, with my mod hopefully being outside the bounds of the universe on that scale. So we are working with a bit of a curve here, and things certainly aren't going to be as grim as whenever we take a look at Cassandra's romp through classical Greece, and we'll get to that later. But until I can spend way too long talking about that game and all of its problems with accuracy, let's talk about Wrath of Sparta. So we're going to start things off with the descriptions of the various factions, because that is actually just the first place the Wrath of Sparta DLC kind of gets activated, is with this interface. Now, I will say, by the way, that this is essentially a live blind reading of everything, and I don't have a script or anything. I'm just gonna kind of go off of what I see and comment as we go. So first and foremost, a quick comment on the flags that were chosen here, or the sort of icons. The Athenae icon is fairly accurate. This is a good, though oddly slightly warped and kind of altered version of their famous Glaukos coin, the owl coin, the little owl coin, which is very much viewed as their main symbol during this era. Basically every strategy game I've ever seen that depicts Athens or Athenae as a distinct faction uses a version of this icon. They include the olive leaves. That's a great addition. And the owl is oriented in nearly the right way. Not to just fill this whole video with self-promotion, but if you want to see a slightly more accurate version of the same symbol, you can check out what I have in my Hegemony mod, where the icon I'm using is actually a near one-to-one copy of the exact shape and proportions of the owl in the coin, but nonetheless, this is a good start for Athenae. Let's take a look at their description here. Athenian aid to the Greek cities of Asia Minor has prompted imperialist Persia to invade mainland Greece twice. I think that is true with the first Persian invasion, and I'll use the names as they appear in this mod. So it does call it Athenae, which is a great start. Doesn't include the circumflex over the E. That's okay. We can't all be Hegemony, but at least they have the sort of transliterated English name closer to the ancient Greeks. That's a good addition. In vanilla Total War Rome 2, it's just called Athens, which is, I think, honestly not that big of a deal. But it is nice to see for a Peloponnesian War scenario that they use the more accurate Athenae. And I'll also note that Persia should really be called Parsa if they're using these older names, but I'll take what I can get. So the framing here of Athenian aid to the Greek city-states prompting both invasions, that's true for the first invasion. The first invasion, and I've actually said this before in places, I believe that the most important kind of sort of a pivotal event, the sort of canon event that defines the Peloponnesian War, that sort of leads to the Peloponnesian War above everything else, where if this was changed, then alt history wouldn't produce the Peloponnesian War. the starting point for that kind of timeline is the Ionian Revolt, is this rebellion of Ionian city-states in Asia Minor from Persia, and the central role that rising power at that point, Athens, plays in trying to help the Ionians fight the Partisans. So the Persian invasion, the first Persian invasion, is accurately described as being a reaction to the Athenian aid to the Ionian Revolt. I don't think the second invasion can really be said to be a reaction to that, or to Athenian aid in the Greek cities generally. The second invasion is a reaction to the first invasion, where at the Battle of Marathon, the Persians are defeated in an upset victory by Athenae and Plataea, who was there too. We don't tolerate Plataea erasure here in this video. So I think that it's much more accurate to say that the first invasion was a reaction to this. But this is also a brisk summary trying to just set up Athenae's starting situation. So I won't necessarily give it, too much trash for oversimplifying the Persian invasions. I do think the Persian invasions are really, really important background context for the Peloponnesian War, because what Athenae did with the Delian League is only makes sense in the context of a Hellas, a Greece that has been kind of rattled by the Persian invasions. But we'll move on. Each time, Athenae proved pivotal in its defeat. That is definitely true, winning a stunning final naval victory at Salamis in 479 BC. I think that's a fair sentence. It also kind of... These two sentences sort of blur together the two invasions. These two invasions were 10 years apart. So it's not like there was one invasion and then immediately afterwards a second invasion. The pivotal sort of characters of these conflicts, which Herodotus and Thucydides both talk about a lot, there's a 10-year time gap really between these series of events, and people age, new people come in, important political figures in the early part of Athenae's golden age kind of get their start in this era. So I think that these sentences blurred together the invasions a little too much, and almost frame the Battle of Salamis as the end of both invasions sort of collectively, but it was very much, it should mention winning a stunning land victory at Marathon and a stunning naval victory at Salamis. It wants to combine these two invasions, but nonetheless, the naval battle of Salamis is actually very much the end of the second invasion, so that's definitely true. And by the way, I appreciate this description text, which is about Athenae, not shoehorning in the Battle of Thermopylae into this description, which would have been the more well-known second invasion battle to talk about, but I imagine the entire Lacedaemon, or I guess we'll see if it's called Sparta. It's probably called Sparta in this mod. Whether the entire Sparta text is just about that. But that battle is famous because of the context around it. It was not actually a decisive battle in that war compared to the Battle of Salamis. Moving on. Its prestige at an all-time high, Athenian military hegemony. There's a shout out to my favorite word. As well as trade and cultural supremacy now seem likely, and with it a chance for revenge. It's an odd way to phrase it. It's sort of talking in the present tense, but this description, chance for revenge against Persia is what it's saying. It's a little unclear, but it's true that these victories do sort of start Athenae on a path towards hegemony, so that's definitely a good statement. This state of affairs, of course, how it should be. There's a typo in the description. Who wrote this? Me? This state of affairs, of course, how it should be. We got the caveman narrator. Athenae leads the Greek world in mathematics, science, philosophy, and architecture. It should be its protector also. ChatGPT write this? Okay, so another quick criticism. Leading the world in architecture, I think that's probably a fair thing to give to Athenae. I think Clorinthos is probably a better architecture world leader in that sense, but for this time period, but Athenae does have some architectural sort of grandeur going on, so that's fine. Mathematics and science is a bit more dubious. I don't think at this point Athenae is super well known for these particular fields, at least not quite yet. I'm thinking more about Hellenistic era Athenae with this stuff, but I admittedly may not know as much about this particular subcategory as some other stuff, so I won't necessarily, take points away, as it were, from this campaign for that statement. Leading the world in philosophy is really dubious. Now, before you have Socrates, you do have an era of an early version of philosophy, mostly helmed by the sophists, and there are some figures in that era, and some of them are Athenian, but not all of them are. A lot of the early philosophy is actually coming out of Asia Minor. In fact, one of the most important writers of pre-Peloponnesian War Hellas is Herodotus, who is from Asia Minor. He's from Halicarnassus. And he is not an Athenian. Now, Thucydides is an Athenian, but he also doesn't write his book until after most of the war has happened. So either way, I'm talking about writing now, but with philosophy, when we think about Greek philosophy, we think of Socrates, we think of Platon, Plato, and even to some extent we think of Aristotle. But these are people who aren't part of the world yet. Socrates in 432, which is when this campaign is set at its beginning, Socrates is like a middle-aged man who's just an Athenian citizen. Now, he is certainly he is certainly active in the early phase, perhaps, of his career as the gadfly, and he might be kind of essentially a, street corner crazy guy, in his antics, but he's certainly not a powerhouse philosophy, presence in 432. And also, he wouldn't have been during his life. The real way he is immortalized and made famous is with Plato's writings, which may or may not actually be accurate to Socrates as a real person. I've talked about this before, but Plato very clearly uses Socrates and his kind of reputation in Athenae as a jumping off point to basically write an idealized or personified version of him, who actually spouts Plato's ideas, which may or may not align with what Socrates believed. We don't know for sure how close things are. Plato was definitely a devout sort of follower of Socrates, but I think that saying that in 432, or before 432, Athenae leads the Greek world in philosophy is a little bit off. It should say that, you can say Athenae leads the world in commerce, that's definitely true, but philosophy as a part of Greek culture is not really omnipresent or even really that important until the Hellenistic period. Because even when Socrates and Platon, because they are alive in 432 BC, but they're not leading Greek culture in any way. I think a big thing with this is that this is the modern day reader or player looking back on ancient Greece, and they flatten together all of the things they know about ancient Greek culture and think, oh, this is what ancient Greek culture was like the whole time. In reality, this stuff has a place in the timeline of history, and the kind of modern idea of philosophy, which really starts with Socrates, just doesn't exist in 432 or before that. And I think that's just a detail which I have worked with my mod to acknowledge and make part of the experience, part of the context there. So it's a shame to see this here, but this is an understandable mistake for a historical recounting of this era, as we are pretty close. If we're talking about archaic Greece and they talk about philosophy, then I know for sure they don't know what they're talking about. But moving on. However, Sparta resents this newfound influence. I guess this is called the Wrath of Sparta, so they're not going to call it Lacedaemon. Maybe they'll reference the name here or there, but either way. Just 50 years after the end of the Persian invasions, war once again looms over the Peloponnesus. The prize is effectively control over the entire country. Athenae's naval might is matched by Sparta's superior land force. Either city, or indeed its Corinthian or Boeotian allies, could emerge from the ensuing conflict victors to claim it. Okay, so this is a pretty inoffensive couple of sentences here, just kind of describing the context of the Peloponnesian War. I do think that there's probably going to be first Peloponnesian War erasure in this campaign as well. Saying that war once again looms, I guess once again implies that war loomed before, but it also just said the Persian invasion, so I don't think we're going to get much reference to the first Peloponnesian War in the 440s, which is less important, obviously, than the second Peloponnesian War, which is most just known as the Peloponnesian War. But it did happen, it did shape things, it did set up the centrality of Megara, of the Megarians, in the geopolitics leading up to this war. I wonder if we're going to see any Magayan decree references in this campaign as well. But either way, as for the land owned by Athenai, there's a lot to unpack here. So first of all, they have now Pactos. That's great to see. That's my first thing I look for in any sort of like map or of any game with the Peloponnesian War. Do they know about Athenai controlling now Pactos? That's very, very important for understanding Athenai's naval strategy in the war, because this was their main port on the western side of the peninsula of Hellas. Now, the way that this seems to have been done here is it blends together many of the Athenian subjects into Athenai's direct territory. This is an inoffensive way of doing it for this particular engine, because the Rome 2 engine, on top of just being kind of a mess for supporting a game like this, doesn't typically like lots of little factions. So my mod Hegemony has the historically accurate, just massive clusterfuck of like hundreds of Delian subject states you can all play as individually. But in this campaign, I'm not going to begrudge that they decided to just represent the Delian League as Athenai, and maybe they include some other countries. I'm noticing, interestingly, Mytilene is not marked as held by Athenai. That is accurate. Mytilene should be an ally, an independent city-state that's an ally of Athenai. We'll see what actually is going on in the game. But where's all the Ionian coast allies? Where are they? Like, this, there should be a ton of blue all over this entire coastline. Now, I get maybe they didn't work on the Anatolian coast that much, and they just wanted it to be mostly held by the single Persia tag that's over there. They didn't have the different satrapies. But this is a pretty big mistake. There should be a bunch of either Athenian allies over there, but I guess because they aren't marking all of them as allies, they should be subjects. So I'm okay with Mytilene. I also noticed Corcyra is not an Athenian-held territory. That's correct. These should be independent. In fact, I think Corcyra should really be playable in this campaign, but that's just my bias, I guess. I'm noticing that the stuff over in Acronarnia, the southern Acronarnia areas with Kefalonia and Zakynthos, that's all held by Athenai. That's probably fine. I think that's reasonable. Euboea being held by them, that's fine. Obviously all of Attica. And then the Cyclades is held by them, that's fine. Is that Kos? Is Kos held by them? It's kind of odd that only Kos is held by them. What about the rest of the area? Yeah, okay, I'm a little confused by this, but... And then they also have Chersonesos, but not the northern part of Thrace. I guess that's probably fine, given the way this province is shaped. They've got, what else do they have? They have Lemnos, that's accurate. They've got the northern coastline of the Aegean, the Thracian coastline, that's accurate. Thasos is definitely accurate. In fact, if Thasos wasn't held by them, I'd be wondering how this universe has Thucydides, because his family is from Thasos. But they also have parts of the Chalcidice Peninsula. As we're going to see when we get into the game here, there is a catastrophic oversight happening over here in Chalcidice, and we'll see if you notice it before I mention it, but keep an eye out for that. So that is Athenai's description and map situation. Their actual gameplay modifiers, wooden wall, +2 recruitment slots in all ports. That's pretty reasonable. Athenai had very good shipbuilding capabilities. Dreams of Empire, -10 happiness in all regions. Again, that's pretty reasonable, especially because in this campaign, the Delian League, it seems to be mostly depicted as direct Athenian territory. This is a pretty good way of representing how the Delians were not happy with being in the Delian League, by and large, by the time of the war. So this is a solid way to gamify that. So we're going to move on now to the other factions, and then we'll hop into the game later and take a look at some of the map inaccuracies, which we will get to. But let's talk about the Boeotian League. Occupying a position of strategic importance on the Gulf of Corinthos, Boeotia has strong frontiers and trade connections across the region. That's a solid opening line. I do wonder why they have conflated Thebes' Boeotian League with being one unified country. It's more of a faction within a faction. It's a faction of Peloponnesian allies led by Thebe, but it's not necessarily a unified country at this point. Later on in history, it sort of becomes more of a unified country during the Theban hegemony, but we're a ways away from that. Thebe, its predominant city and capital of the Boeotian League, alright, that's fine so far, was a religious confederation at first, but it now but is now chiefly concerned with mutual defense. Okay, sure. The city's surprising support of Persia during its second invasion caused Thebai's temporary displacement as the League's leader, before perceived Athenian imperialism led to its reinstatement by Sparta. That's actually kind of a goated sentence. That is a kind of obscure piece of lore about Thebai, which I'm glad to see referenced here. Whoever wrote these descriptions had some very unusual ways of thinking about this, because this is a really good piece of context for why Thebai actually shouldn't be in charge of a unified, playable country. I get, again, with this campaign scenario, merging the Boeotian League together is understandable, but this sentence helps explain why Thebai's leadership is under some question, and it does correctly blame Athenian imperialism for Lacedaemon basically forcing Thebai back into that position. 10 years of Athenian occupation followed before the Boeotians won their independence at the Battle of Coronea. Okay. Despite a negotiated peace, the reformed Boeotian League's enmity towards Athenae continues unabated. Now fueled by its rival interference in Corinthian colonial matters, we've got a Plataea reference, or pardon me, not a Plataea reference, a Potidaea reference. Look at me, maybe I did write this. We got a Potidaea reference. Oh my god, okay. I'm not gonna bury the lead. The thing missing from Chalkidiki, Potidaea is not there. You can't not have Potidaea in your Peloponnesian War game. What are you doing? It starts in 432. Where's Potidaea? You gotta have Potidaea. So Potidaea is in the lore, but not in the actual game. Okay, so this Corinthian colonial matter, that's... Well, actually, hold on. Are they talking about Potidaea? Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. They might be talking about the Corcyraean War. That's another Corinthian colonial matter. That's probably what they're actually talking about, because the Potidaea... The fact that Potidaea's, crisis with Athenae was over its Corinthian colonial influence is a more obscure piece of information than Corinth and Corcyra going to war in, 430, or no, 429? I don't remember exactly, but right before the main war started. So maybe this is a reference to Potidaea. It's probably actually a reference to Corcyra, so we'll see. The Boeotians are poised, along with its allies Sparta and Corinthos, to end Athenae's empire building once and for all. Okay. Rising military plus 15% morale for all units. That's fine. That's sort of it's kind of a historically unverifiable claim that their military was more confident, but sure, nothing wrong with that. I mean, it does reference the historical Theban hegemony after the Battle of Leuctra in a couple of decades. Rival of Athens, minus 20 diplomatic relations with all Ionian factions. That's fair, I suppose. I don't know if Thebai in this time would have been seen as a main rival of Athenae. Corinthos much more fits that bill, even more in some ways than Lacedaemon or Sparta, I guess. But sure, Thebai would probably consider itself a rival of Athenae and see itself as more of an equal, although that's obviously a bit of an overstatement. But overall, this is a fairly okay description. It makes less historical blending than attempts than the Athenae description, mostly just because there's not as much history to go over, so it's more kind of puffery, where it's kind of more just saying, hey, here's this generic situation. With Athenae, this description, in my mod, my description of Athenae's backstory that you can read, it's 500 pages long. There's so much context behind this war, and so trying to narrow it down to a smaller description is obviously going to leave some stuff on the table. This one here is a bit more, okay. As for the actual territory, this looks fine to me. They've got the land of Boeotia. Now, something that we are going to see once we get into the game is that they start in control of Delphi, which is a wild decision. Thebai definitely didn't conquer Delphi before 432. Now, Delphi is in the area, and I understand that they are trying to, build these regions and provinces around the terrain they have to work with. So maybe they just couldn't really squeeze Delphi into the nearby Aetolia region. That's a better region, I think, to associate it with than Boeotia. But you shouldn't start the league in charge of Delphi. That makes it seem like Delphi's part of the Boeotian League, which is definitely not true. And then we also see I don't remember. I think this is Opus up here. I don't know if they have Lamia or not, but Opus I think is up here, and it should not be part of the league, so that's accurate. Okay, moving on to Corinthos. I'm excited to see what they say about maybe Potodea gets referenced here. Unified under an oligarchic system of government, Corinthos has become rich from trade due to its geographic position, using the wealth to launch public construction projects on a large scale and forge colonies as far afield as Sicily. That's accurate. Corinthos was a big colonizer, probably more even than Atenae for most of their histories. Following a period of tyranny, it allied with Sparta, fighting to repel the Persian invasions as part of the Hellenic League. Okay, I don't remember, I don't know as much like textbook amount of Corinthian history as Athenian, so I don't remember if the tyranny period is exactly here, but I don't see anything facially wrong so far. Although Corinthos supported the Athenians during the Greco-Persian Wars, Atenae's backing of the rebel colony of Corcyra during its struggle under Corinthian rule has caused hostilities to break out between the two great cities. Okay, so we do have a Corcyra noting here, which is accurate. Calling Corcyra a rebel colony feels a little mean. I feel like this was written by Corinthos. Corcyra is a bit more than just a rebel colony, in my opinion. They are the third naval power of Hellas after Corinthos and Atenae, and they worked hard to get to that point, so just kind of blurring them down to a rebel colony of Corinthos is like the Corinthian assessment of it. But it is true that Atenae's backing of Corcyra is a major cause of the war. Yeah, so that part's definitely not inaccurate. Just the framing of this is kind of funny. A naval confrontation is sure to ensue, so Corinthos will need a strong fleet if it is to deny Athenian naval supremacy. Yet Corinthos' sizable citizen army also makes it a dangerous proposition on land, and far more than a mere foil to the expected Spartan battlefield supremacy. That's an interesting way to frame it, where Corinthos is a land power comparable to Sparta. That's just definitely not true. Corinthos was never anywhere near the land power of Sparta, but their naval power is definitely accurate, and I think that the sentence kind of describing a Corinthian Athenian naval parity or similar naval strength, although it's a little generous to Corinthos, like Corinthos was clearly inferior to Atenae and mainly like the Delian fleets in naval power, it is a powerful enough foil to them that it like requires Athenian effort and strategy to work around. The main thing Corinthos actually does to change the naval situation is controlling its isthmus, which prevents any of the Delian ships from using the passageway on land between the two sides. So Atenae, and this is part of why Naupactus was so important, that was Atenae's main base of operation on the other side of the isthmus, basically. So, love of Aphrodite, plus 4 growth in all regions. Corinthos did consider Aphrodite a very important goddess for the city. I believe it was even a patron goddess of their city, so that's completely accurate. Maritime heritage, plus 15% ship battle speed. Nothing wrong with that. I think that's a pretty good addition. Corinthos does have actually quite a long history with naval warfare and just sea stuff. I think they're actually attributed to be the inventor of the trireme as a ship, so that is a great note there. As for their starting territory, they own this part here, and I will note that Corinthos is placed in the Argolis region, which is an interesting way of framing it, but I guess given what they have to sort of squeeze together with the territories, it may have been necessary at the end of the day. They also own a bunch of stuff up here. Now, they should have, what's it called? Oh my gosh, I can't remember. It's their main colony city north of north of the other Argos. There's a Corinthian Argos up here. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. We're gonna see it in the game. Maybe maybe I shouldn't gloat so much because I can't remember the city names, but that's probably fine. And then I'm not entirely sure what's going on up here. Maybe this is Potodea up here? I don't remember seeing that before, but they own something up here, apparently. That's news to me. This should be held by Macedon, but we'll see what's going on. Moving on to Sparta. Here we go. An entirely militarized culture. That's a great opening statement. That's completely true. The Spartans are truly a force to be reckoned with. However, despite Sparta's command of Greek forces during the recent Greco-Persian War, and its notable sacrifice at Thermopylae, okay, that's a tasteful, limited, reasonable reference to Thermopylae, I appreciate that. What didn't have a tasteful, limited reference to that was the Wrath of Sparta trailer, which is just basically a 3D fan animation of the movie 300. Alright, moving on. Atenai's own victories have dramatically increased its prestige, and war with Persia is high on its agenda. High on Atenai's agenda? Sparta's agenda? I'm not entirely sure who is talking about. Overall, it's fine so far. Although Sparta may not be sufficiently recovered to face... Oh, it's talking about Sparta. To face the Persians with allies such as Corinthos, it could yet defeat Atenai in the Delian League states. Delian League reference in this campaign. Where are the states? We're talking about independent Corcyra, independent Mytilene. I guess the Delian League is going to be referenced in this campaign, but maybe just with the allies that are not held by Atenai directly. To do this, Sparta's Peloponnesian League must achieve a decisive naval victory against Atenai and break the loyalty of its allies. That's a great... Actually, that's a really, really smart summary of Lacedaemon's wartime sort of reality. Was it couldn't beat Atenai on land and couldn't reach a lot of the League, so it had to fight proxy wars where it could sort of get stuff on land, and otherwise just wait to get a navy to blockade Piraeus to stop the food imports, which would ultimately get Atenai to capitulate. And Lacedaemon did, throughout the whole war, try to get more and more of the Delian League to defect. The problem is, at this point, most of the Delian League was essentially part of Atenai's faction under duress, and Atenai's naval power kept them there, right? So it's not like Lacedaemon's going to convince them to defect just by having a good speech. They can't defect. They're afraid of Atenai's triremes, their triremes, sailing to them and sacking them, right? Just look at what happened with Mytilene. So obviously that happens early in the war, and then throughout the rest of the war, all of the Delian subjects are thinking about Mytilene with everything that happens after that. Let's see here. To do this, Sparta's Peloponnesian League must achieve a decisive naval Oh, I just read that. This may not be straightforward, however. Spartan land forces may be supreme, but Atenai's navy is undefeated, and for the Spartans, the ultimate warriors, intrigue and espionage leave a foul taste. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, this is pretty accurate. Atenai's navy is not to be touched by Lacedaemon, and Lacedaemon on land is the supreme power, so that's pretty good. I do have a major question about Sparta's map here. What's going on up here? Does Sparta control Opos? Is that what that is? What? Okay, it'll come down to who is up here. Actually, Opos might be there. Is this Lamia? Sparta starts with Lamia? That's news to me. Okay, we're gonna see what's going on up here once I get into the game here, but otherwise, Sparta starts with all of Laconia and Messenia. That's accurate. Nothing wrong with that. I just am wondering what's going on up here. We've got the Northern Spartan Exclave. That's a new development. Alright, Helots, plus 100% wealth from slaves. Yep, that's accurate. Spartiate, plus 3 experience for all Spartan units. That's probably a good way to gamify the idea of the Spartiates, because that's the upper class, or I should say that's the citizen class of Lacedaemonian society, basically the Spartans as we think of them. So yeah, that's totally fine. So those are all of the descriptions and the map first impressions. But before we get into the actual campaign, let me take a quick look over at the custom battles. Actually, let me see if there's any historical battles for Wrath of Sparta. No, that's not how it works in this game. Custom battle, or Wrath of Sparta, here we go. All right, let's see what we have here. So in terms of land units, anything interesting with Atenai? All right, looks like their spears are mostly hoplite. That's totally fine. Archers, javelin men, and slingers as missile infantry. That's accurate. Is this mercenary throwing axemen? Agriadian axemen. All right. I'm not going to be as bothered by weird mercenaries, because a lot of mercenary units did offer weird extra tactics. Melee cavalry. What do we have here? Light cav Hippeus and mercenary Ionian Hippeus. I wonder how much melee cav actually are considered normal in the campaign. They should be pretty rare, to be completely honest, in this setting. But, okay, nothing egregiously wrong here. Let's take a look at naval battles. What do we have here? We have Tri-Race. They're actually called Tri-Race. Oh my god, I didn't realize that would be here. And die race, okay, so they actually do the tri-race, die race split that I had in Hegemony for a while. That's actually really interesting. I didn't know that they did this here. So they actually do consider die race to be a warship type, which I have backed away from based on my research. I think that this is actually a little inaccurate, to be honest, and based on me having made that change, I'm sort of sticking by it. Die race, or kind of two-deck rowers, were a known kind of ship in this era, but were they used as regular warships? It doesn't seem so. It seems as though triremes or tri-race were considered the mainstay warship type, and you wouldn't really use lighter ships normally. Maybe they were used on occasion, but the main thing to understand about Greek naval warfare in this era is that it was very lacking in like strict orthodox or strict doctrine. It was kind of an early era of naval warfare in the history of the world, really. There wasn't really much before this that they could learn from. And it mostly just resembled land warfare, but with ships. So instead of a phalanx of hoplite, which is itself a fairly basic way of doing warfare with infantry units, it was a kind of phalanx of ships, right? These big formation ship movements. And use of lighter ships for flanking certainly could happen, but it doesn't seem as though most fleets had strategies that advanced. It mostly just had the ships ramming each other or rowing through one another to try to ram each other from the sides. It was mostly a ramming game, so nothing egregiously bad here. I do like that they use the word tri-race. That is nice to see. Alright, moving on to the land armies of the Boeotian League. It looks like it's basically the same, which is accurate. What do we have here? Theben Hippeus. Sure. Do we have any, let's see. I can't see the description here. But no, I can't actually. The name of Thebes, the horsemen of city in Grotlo. Okay, I mean, Thebes may have had some more cavalry, but I don't really think this is super well supported by the record either way. So overall, this looks fine. Naval battle, I imagine, okay, yeah, it's just the same stuff here. That's fine. Let's take a look at Corinthos. Exact same thing. I mean, I know that this DLC was criticized for how undiverse all the armies are. This is very accurate, that this is basically what all the armies would look like. Just hoplite supported by light troops. The Peloponnesian War was not interesting because of the battles, and that is maybe why this kind of game isn't the best way to depict it. The Peloponnesian War is interesting because of the grand strategy, like overwhelmingly so. Right? Like that's why I think Imperator Rome is a much better engine or a better setting to use for this matter. So looks like Corinthos has just the same kinds of tri-race as everybody else, and die race as well. Sparta has less. That's probably pretty accurate. Yeah. Spartan Marines, interesting. I don't even know if Sparta should have any ships at all, but I guess they did technically later gain ships. Now, in terms of the Spartan land infantry, they have a bit more variety here. What do we have? Royal Spartans, Spartan Youths, okay. Skiritai, okay. Perikoi Hoplite. I guess the Lacedaemonians occasionally let the Perikoi take up arms. I feel like that didn't happen that often, so I don't know about this. Spartan Hoplites and Royal Spartans, okay. Okay, we do have Helots over here. I was wondering if the Helots were going to be shown in combat roles. So whether or not the Helots were allowed to be involved in combat is a big question. The Helots were basically, out of necessity, were used for almost everything in society, and they certainly took on non-combat capacity in supporting the Lacedaemonian soldiers. Giving the Helots actual weaponry and training them to be ranged units is a little dubious. I don't know if this would have actually happened, but at least the Helots are being referenced at all, which I guess is better than it could have been. Spartan cavalry is a little funny to see. I don't know if they would have had units like this, but okay, so in terms of the actual units, both on land and sea, things are pretty accurate, with a couple eyebrow raises based on the names, but we're not seeing like chariots or anything really goofy that doesn't belong in the setting. Nothing like that. The big focus on heavy hoplite units supported by light range units, that's the key thing that I like to see. This is basically how all of these armies would have been organized and would have been set up. So having done that, let's hop into some of these campaigns and see how the opening narration frames things, and also see what funny things on the map we can find now. So let's start with Athenai. Do I want to change any of this stuff? I don't really think so. This is well. I'm not actually going to play the game here. I'm just going to look at it. So let's go ahead and start the Athenai campaign. All right. And by the way, I hope you can tell that even though I am making fun of this a little bit, I do actually really respect... oh, here's something I don't respect is this opening cinematic. Let's make fun of this for a moment. Alright, got Sparta. No walls, that's great to see. That's accurate. Sparta did not have walls as a city during this era. So this must be the Peloponnesian Conference in 430 being continued here.
We are exposed to threats from across the Aegean, and our people will suffer. If the Corinthians want war, they should seek it alone.
I can't pause it, but framing this as Corinthus wanting war is pretty accurate
cowering
for
from
this
them like
conference.
chided slaves. We spilled blood at Potidaea.
Potidaea reference!
Yes!
Yes!
Sparta will hold their ambition.
Your flattery is
Fuck
wasted.
Potidaea doubters.
You know not
Potidaea
what
reference.
you ask.
Oh my
All
god.
eyes look
I'm
on
so excited about
Sparta,
that.
and this is what you would have them see.
Which king is that? Is that Archidamus sitting there? A little young for that. It would be the young guy.
You are Pandora, clutching at a vessel you do not understand.
And we got the 300 shots. Yep, slow motion.
They
So
dare think themselves your
cool.
equal.
Zack Snyder.
None
It's
can
funny
match your
because there's no
skill.
blood in the cinematic.
It is every Spartan's duty to embody the very nature of war. Strike now, I beg you.
You would plunge Greece into chaos.
Then from chaos, we will rise!
Alright. So, okay. Let's see how the Athenai opening oration cleans things up a little bit. Let's see what they have to say.
40 years have passed since our great victories over the Persians. It should have been the start of our golden age, but instead we squabble amongst ourselves. The Hellenic League, formed to take the fight to the invaders.
Oh. It just crashed. Okay. Okay. Pardon me? Crashed to desktop. Okay, I haven't seen that from Rome 2 before. Interesting. Let me get it loaded up again. The game heard how much I was making fun of it, and it was like, nope, we're not gonna let him get away with that. I guess while it's reloading, I will comment on that cinematic. So I think that's depicting the Peloponnesian Conference of 430. Framing it as the Corinthians pushing for war is accurate. The Potidaea reference is great to see. That's something that would have been brought up there. They should also be talking about the Megarian Decree much more, but I guess that they're trying to have it be kind of more exciting and not really get into the economic stuff. But the Megarian Decree is a much bigger part of why the war was declared than people sometimes realize. So let me try that again. That's kind of funny that it's just a straight up crash to desktop. I guess this is kind of an old game at this point. Alright, let's give that another go. I'll skip the cinematic this time because we've already seen it now. But there's nothing egregiously wrong there except for the age of the king. Which king is that? It should either be Archidamos or the really young, teenage boy king at this point, because Sparta has two kings. And also, I don't think I'm seeing two kings, so we'll see later if they have two kings in the actual king.
40 years have passed since our great victories over the Persians. It should have been
Also,
the start
40,
of
so
our
that
golden age.
472?
But instead we squabble
That's 40 years
amongst
ago
ourselves.
from this.
The Hellenic League,
Okay.
formed to take the fight to the invaders, did not last. Suspicious of the ambitions of Athena,
You should have said 50
Sparta and
years.
many other great
Also, they do pronounce it as
city-states
Athena,
left. They
which
were right to
I'll
be
talk about that more in a
suspicious.
minute.
Athena has turned the league they formed into an empire under their control. It is now less a collection of independent cities and more a series of bases for their powerful navy.
That's correct.
In the face of Athenian hegemony, Sparta has
Hegemony?
reformed
Okay.
the Peloponnesian League with Corinthus and the smaller Boeotian
Reformed?
League of
Huh?
cities.
Okay.
As these two powerful
It
groups
is Lamia.
face
What?
off against each other,
What?
war is brewing.
Spartan
Let us
Lamia?
not forget the Persians.
Pardon me?
Their empire still stands. and
Oh
keeps a
my
careful
god.
eye
Okay,
on
we're gonna have to take a look at
developments in
that.
Greece
Just a
to make sure that no single group becomes too powerful.
What? Spartan
Athena
Lamia.
is
Okay.
already at war. Clashes with Corinthus have begun.
Okay, yep. For 432, that's correct.
In the west, the island of Corcyra has appealed to the Athenians for help against its colonial masters. A fleet has already been dispatched to
A
help.
fleet was dispatched 2 years
To
ago.
the north, Olynthus has become a target. Far from its homeland, It is a target right for
Olympos is a full town on this map?
It is vital that
No
Athena
Potidaea,
hold
but they
all
have
of its
Olympos?
cities
Okay.
and meet Spartan
Okay,
military
sure.
might on land with its impressive navy. True
What is
dominance
Sparta
over all
doing
of
over
Greece
there?
awaits the
So
victor.
many questions. What? Okay, is this some like 432 border stuff that I just don't remember? I'm pulling out the phone. I'm going on Wikipedia to check this one. Wikipedia. If Lamia, okay, I think of Lamia as very much an independent, neutral city-state, but it's possible they joined the Peloponnesians early in the war, and because I don't typically research further in from 431 for my like map design, I just didn't know it, or I wasn't like sort of thinking about it. Let's see, am I the fool, or am I onto something here? Lamia City. I'm on Wikipedia now. Let's see what we got here. I don't want the game to crash again. That's why I'm doing it on my phone. History. Okay, let's see here. City from the Polis. Important strategic location. Yep, that's fine. Is it just because of Thermopylae? Is that why that's controlled by Lamia? Oh boy. There's nothing here about being in the. Yeah, it's not in the Peloponnesian War at all. Hold on. Peloponnesian League members. I don't think I've ever seen Lamia on this list. I've looked at this list a lot on Wikipedia. Let's see. List of members. I'm confident Lamia's not on here anywhere. Later editions. Beatian League. Alright, that's fine. Phocians. Okay, the Eastern Locrians are in the league. That's fine. But that's covered by Opos. Or sort of covered by Opos. Oh, Ambracia. That's the city I was thinking of before. Yeah, Lamia never joined. So what... Okay, is it... Let's look at the history thing that pops up here. Lamia has been occupied since the Bronze Age. At least its position over the narrow coastal plain of Thermopylae gives it strategic value, connecting it to southern Greece and Thessaly. In the years since the War with Persia, the city has been fortified. Not by the Spartans. What are they doing up here? So I could maybe see an argument for having Opos be held by Lacedaemon if we're thinking of like this is an independent city-state, but it's part of... Actually, is Opos in the Peloponnesian League in this year? Hold on, I'm going back on Wikipedia. I wish I had my mod open on like another monitor so I could check my own map, because I believe that's a pretty accurate map at this point, given all the research I've done. Oh my gosh, please. Way to be Opos with a U. Here it is. Other uses. City in ancient Lucrece. Yep, that's fine. Was it in the Peloponnesian League? Okay, yeah, so that's what I thought. So it is a Peloponnesian League member, yeah, because it's the one in that area that is not unaligned in 431, even though they later do become aligned. Both of the Locrians groups become aligned. So this should actually be held by either an independent country that's allied with Lacedaemon or Sparta, or it should be held by Sparta. Not held by the Boeotian League. This isn't even in Boeotia. But this is the real sin. Like, what is this? What's going on here? So Lamia is in the right spot, more or less. But this should be a neutral city. It should not be an ally of... Or, not even ally. It should not be held by Lacedaemon. Like, what is... I guess Brasidas is up here? Brasidas didn't come up here yet, did he? Hold on. I'm going back on Wikipedia. Maybe the march did happen in 432. I thought it happened in the 420s. Am I actually, like, completely off? Hold on. Let's see. No, yeah, it's in the early... Well, it's in, like, the latter... How do I phrase it? Like, between 425 and, like, 420... Well, he died in 422, but, like, I think 424 is when the march began. What's he doing up here in 432? Little early, Brasidas. So, is this meant to be... Because I think maybe he captured Lamia, or he at least interacted with Lamia during his march. We're a little early for this one. Like, okay, this is just a disaster. Okay, So at least we've resolved what's going on there. So let's take a look at the map more generally. So let's see, we got Athenai. Legend speaks of a contest between the gods Poseidon and Athena for the favor of the Greek people. Choosing Athena's olive tree over Poseidon's spring, they named their new city for her. And that's why them calling it Athena in the narration is fine, because Athenai is the ancient Greek name for Athena. So it's not a huge deal. I call it Athenai, but calling it Athena would also be accurate. Well placed as a hub of trade in the Peloponnesus. Well placed as a hub of trade in the Peloponnesus? Alright, got some more geography head scratchers. This is not the Peloponnesus, but okay, sure. Athenai has transcended the rules of kings and tyrants to become a democratic state, I should say. Now riding high on the prestige of its great naval victory over the Persians at Salamis, the city is entering a golden age of power. This is not very accurate. The city is, like, closing out a golden age of power. The Peloponnesian War was the beginning of the end of Athenai's power, and its golden age basically starts to wind down with the lead up to this Peloponnesian War. Arguably, the first Peloponnesian War actually starts to challenge the golden age, which starts in the 50s, to some extent even in the 460s. But yeah, this is a little dubious. Alright, so we got Athenai, we got Laurion over here, that's fine. Piraeus is just merged with Athenai. They do have the long wall graphically, which is nice to see, but that's, for the scale of this map, that's not the end of the world. I do have a few questions about Big Attica. It includes Podos and Naxos. Also, there's no... oh my gosh. What in the world? So there's Delos, and then what the hell is... Hold on. I can't believe all these names. Delos. The island right next to Delos. Mykonos, that's what it is. I was thinking Mytilene, that's not right. Mykonos. Where's Mykonos? That's kind of an important place to include. And Delos, which is right here. Alright, so Andros is included as well, though this is in Euboea. Alright, I'm not gonna read all these. Okay, so there's just no Cyclades, like, region on its own. This is definitely enough territory to be a region, but okay, sure. They have Podos, they have Naxos. Them being considered part of Attica is a little weird, but it's not the worst thing I've seen so far. Euboea, including Andros, is also a little dubious, but okay. Charistos is in the right spot. No Eritrea, alright, but they do have Chalkis and Oreos up here. Alright, that's fine. Okay, let's do a quick Thessaly check. Larissa, Pherae, and Pharsalos are all, I think, in basically the right spots. They're kind of far away from each other. They're actually all more kind of clustered together over here, but I wasn't expecting Thessaly accuracy from this campaign, to be honest. That's kind of a tough one to get. Moving north, okay, Dion's in the right spot. Actually, is it? I don't know if it is, actually. Okay, Agai being the capital, that's great, that's accurate. I'm actually really impressed they don't have Pelas as the capital, because that's what people would have been expecting. Agai was actually the capital. Now, Pelas should actually be a town, maybe even the provincial capital, with Agai being a village, in all honesty. Pelas was here, and it was going to become the capital later, but alright. We have Arnisa over here, and then Argos. Argos Orestico. Okay, I don't know what in the world this place is, but okay, sure. Okay, over here we have Epiros with Dodona. That's fine. Their capital is Elea. That's a little interesting. I don't know why in the world Epiros would be over here. Okay, here's Ambracia, held directly by Corinthos, and then Anactorio. Oh, this is because of Actium, I think. Yeah, I think they're trying to reference Actium with Anactorio being a town. And then Pronoi over here, they held... Huh? Wait, so I thought this was held by Athens in the map. I even complimented that. I guess... Hold on. What? Did they change the map after they drew it? Like, wasn't this noted as its own, like, Anarcarnia area? Also, this should be called Anarcarnia, not Ambracia, but okay, sure. Pronoi being a Corinthian town is wild. What in the world is going on over here? So first of all, it should be independent, but second of all, if it's going to belong to one of the great powers, it should be held by Athenai. like Zakynthos south of it. These are Delian subject states. So I don't know what Corinthos did to get control of Pernoi. Maybe this is some 432 strategic stuff that I just... Oh, wait, hold on, wait a minute. 432 is before 431 in BCE. I'd completely forgot that. So this is even less accurate. Wait a minute. Yeah, okay. Before, when I said the Peloponnesian Conference of 430, I meant 432. I got turned around. So... What? So, okay, so what's Perseus doing up here? Why do they have Lamia? Why do they have Pernoi? Oh, I have so many questions now. Okay, so okay, now that I've realized this, the references to the Corcyrian conflict make more sense because it's happening right now. But that just raises even more questions then about why is it starting in 432? Also, everyone's at war already. The war wasn't declared until 431, so another issue. Okay, moving on. Antigonea up here. I don't know what in the world, where this is. But Corcyra, that's at least... Oh my god. Corcyra's in the wrong spot. How did you screw this one up? Corcyra should be over here. It should be on the east coast of its island. It's not on the west coast of its island. That's a... There's literally water right here. How did you mess that one up? Okay. Alright, moving on. Let's see. Okay, Amphipolis is up here, that's fine. Crinides? Okay. Abdera's in the right spot. Marne is in the right spot. Thasos, I think that's probably in the right spot. I think it's on the north side, I don't remember for sure. The Thasos Island's a little big, though. Ionos is fine. Kypsela up here is fine. Okay, and then we have all the way up to Byzantium up here. Okay. Let's see. Kazakos. Oh, yeah, so we can't actually see the whole map here. So we do have Ilion over here held by the Ionian League. Let's take a look at this faction. So it looks like... Is Mytilene the leader of the Ionian League? I guess they've represented the Delian League as the Ionian League? Mytilene... Okay, so they... To the credit of this campaign, they have accidentally stumbled backwards and fell down 5 flights of stairs into the Mytilene mainland, which is an obscure piece of border history that's in my mod. But they did it by having everything else be wrong about Asia Minor, by having one unified Ionian League faction. This is really, like, not accurate for 432. But they do have Ilion under the control of Mytilene, although I guess Mytilene is not the capital? Who is the capital? Hold on, let me look up diplomacy. Huh? Hold on. Miletos is the capital of the Ionian League? I don't know about that. It's a little dubious. Alright, so they don't have the mausoleum at Halicarnassos. That's good to see. I did notice before, yeah, Rhodos. This is just completely wrong. This should be called Lindos. Or not, sorry, not Lindos. This should be called, Lindos is the south one. It starts with an I. Hold on. I'm checking Wikipedia again. I want to get these names right if I'm going to make fun of it. Is it Ialisos? I think it's Ialisos. Let me check that. Ialisos. Yeah, that's. I was right. It's Ialisos. So, Rhodos is the product of Sunokismos, of its island, and this happens later in time. I think it's after the war, because of Athenai losing the war and the Delian League kind of leaving the area. So this place should just be called Ialisos, and it would be accurate, basically, given the scale of things. Carpathos is included, interesting. And then over here on Crete, we've got Knossos and Gortina. These are basically in the right spots. Knossos should probably be coastal, but at this point, I'm just glad to see it's here. Cadonia's up here, and then, where's the... Oh, is it just 3? Okay. Now they got Cathera over here. Is this the right spot for Cathera? I think it is the right spot. And then we got Sparta with walls. Okay, I retract my compliment. This should be unwalled. They should have changed the engine to allow this to be unwalled. Sparta being unwalled is actually a pretty important part of the like context of warfare in the Peloponnese. Not that it happened much in this actual war, but then we have Argos up here as a minor settlement. Hold on. Okay, so the Argolis... I know I'm jumping all over the place, but there's just so much going on here. the Argolis region has Corinthos as the capital, and Argos is the minor settlement. And where's the Argolis? Where's Epidaurus? Where's Troezen? Where's Hermion? Where are they? They're just not here. What? Or who else is in the Argolis? What? Argolid Melos? Argolid Melos? Okay. You've got one chance to redeem yourself now. Argolid Melos. Who are you allied with? Let's take a quick look. You're basically unaligned. Okay, hold on. You're Dorian. That's correct. And because you're Dorian, perhaps you should be aligned with your actual historical ally, Sparta. Okay. And then Mantinea is in Argolis? What the hell is happening in the Peloponnese? This is... I don't think I've ever seen a more bewildering, like, province layout in the history of grand strategy. Like, everything here is wrong. Corinthos isn't the capital of Argolis. Argos is the capital of Argolis. Mantinea is in Arcadia. It's not in Argolis. I think the problem is, for some reason, they decided to not have Arcadia be its own, like, province or its own region. So... at least Mantinea is here, but I noticed there's no Tegea. I think Tegea is more important to include than Mantinea, but that's what they chose to do. They put Mantinea in Argolis. Having Melos be in Argolis is one of the decisions of all time. I don't know what in the world compelled this choice, but okay, sure. Moving on, we've got Lacedaemon, which just includes all of their territory. This should probably be split into two different, I guess in this game we call it provinces. We do have Messenia up here. It's in the right spot, but like I said in my... I guess I said this most recently in my Discord for Hegemony. Messenia shouldn't actually be a city by now, but this place says that Melos is in Argolis, so I've got to scale my expectations a little bit here. And then Pylos over here. What are we in the Bronze Age? Now, Pylos is an important city, but it's not more important than some of the other cities that could have been depicted. There's no Scythian. There's no... well, mainly it's just Scythian that I'd want to see. There should really be Scythian over here. Okay, up here we've got Elis with the actual city of Elis. That's in the right spot. I don't know what that lake is next to it, but okay, sure. We've got Olympia in basically the right spot. No Leprium, no Pisa, nothing like that. What? Patrai is up here? Okay, first of all, Patrai should be on the coast. I know it's next to Naupactos, but that's historically what was going on. Second of all of the Achaean cities to include, you pick Patrai. Okay, I can think of at least 3 cities more important in this area to include other than Patrai. It should have been Dyme, it should have been Pellene, or it should have been Sicyon. I know those Pellene and Sicyon are close to Corinthos, but just include Dyme then. Why is Patrai the one you pick? And it's in the wrong spot. It should be further north. It should be on the coast. This is a coastal city. Okay, moving on. Up here, what do we have? Aetolia is now Naupactos, and Thermon. Okay, it's in the wrong spot. Also, the lake is in the wrong spot. How did you screw this one up? The lake should be over here, but okay, sure. Thermon is in the relatively right spot. And then, we've got Boeotian Delphi. What the fuck? Okay. So as it turns out, Spartan Lamia was the least of my problems with this campaign map. Oh boy, okay. Any other standout goofy moments? Colossae being its own settlement on this scale of this map is a little dubious. Kibera? Okay. Okay, they have Phaselis, but it's not held by the Greeks. Isn't Phaselis most well known for not being a Greek city? Or, I mean, not being an Anatolian city? Also, I should probably note, Unified Persian Empire as a faction is a choice. Xanthos, alright, that's relatively correct. I think Xanthos was the smaller city. I don't remember the name of it. There's another city right next to it that was the actual capital at the time, but alright, that's fine. Actually, isn't Xanthos the name of the province? Okay, you know what, never mind. I'm not gonna... I can't. Nidos, alright, that's fine. Kos, Halicarnassos, alright. Samos is over here. Is that the right spot? I think it's probably the right spot. Ephesus should be coastal. Smyrna shouldn't be called Smyrna yet. It would have had its older Greek name. Smyrna was the name it took later. Sardes is a little close to Smyrna. Like, what is happening here? What we got? Actually, hold on. Let me think about the... I think Sardes should be over here, to be honest, but it's... This area is a little warped, so it's hard to tell. Chios is in the right spot. I think Chios should probably be the major city here, to be honest, over Mytilene. Actually, I guess compared to Mytilene should be more major, but... Okay, Pergamon being held by Persia, that's correct. It's also a little far towards the coast, but it's not the end of the world. Ilion being here is, I guess it's because people know what it is, but I feel like there's more important cities over here if you're going to just use one city. Yeah, okay, so I think that basically wraps up my campaign map review. Obviously, like, I'm just going off of memory. I don't have, like, a map of Greece in front of me, or really the best resource I could have for comparing it to Hegemony, which is my Hegemony map. But hopefully, I've expressed my main criticisms of the issues. I think it's mostly just about what was chosen to be prioritized on a map that's this tight and small, because you can only have so many settlements. I think the most egregious mistakes here, other than this bewildering early Brasidas march with the Spartan Lamia, I consider this a huge problem because it completely changes where the theaters of the war are at the start. There was not a major Peloponnesian land force up here, basically, in the Thessaly area. Not yet, right? We're a ways away from that. Especially not before the war starts in 432. Opos being held by the Boeotians and Delphi being held by the Boeotians is pretty goofy. Patrae not being on the coast is a little bewildering. Mantinea being picked over Tegea and it being in Argolis, and Argolis having Corinthos as the capital and having Melos in Argolis is... other than that, most of the choices here are, and again, Western Corcyra is a little strange, but most of these choices are not, like, ruinous, but some of them are a little head-scratching. Again, no Potidea is really funny. They mention it in the text. Why would you include Olympos? You could have put Potidea right here. You could have just had it be Potidea, right? Even if they said this was Potidea, I would have been okay with that, because it's in the relatively right spot. It should be basically right here, but this is, like, you know, in the... Like, for this campaign, it's, like, close enough. Like, that's the closest I can hope for. Also, I don't know why Amphipolis is, like, a gigantic metropolis. Like, look at the size of Amphipolis. This was not, like, a massive metropolis. It was a major city for the area, but, like, it was still a fairly newly built colony city. So let's tone down our our city scale here a little bit. It's, like, larger than Atenai. Look at this, like... I think it actually is physically larger than Atenai. That's crazy. That's crazy. Also, I know we're dealing with a certain scale, but no Eleusis, no having Piraeus not be its own city as well. What else are some major exclusions? Tegea not being here is a problem. I think Pallene should be here, to be honest. I think Patrae should be replaced by Pallene and have Pallene be a independent, or even have it be owned by Lacedaemon would be accurate. I think Pallene is too important not to include. Who else? I think no Plataea is another issue, but I guess at the end of the day, with this scale, that would have been kind of hard to pull off. No Eritrea is eyebrow-raising. No Mykonos, no Delos, that's a problem. Where else? I think there should be some other city-states on Mytilene. They should have Eresos at the very least, but no, it's just owned by Mytilene by itself. Where else are there problems? I think there should also be Pelas up here. It shouldn't be the capital. It is correct that Agai is the capital at this time, but Pelas should be here, in my opinion. These cities should be closer together. Corcyra should be in the right spot. Sparta should not be walled. Sparta, honestly, crazy idea. Sparta I mean, the problem is in this engine, the provincial capital is always walled. They should have given it a special rule to not be walled, because Sparta being unwalled is an important piece of history about how the Peloponnesian League managed its core. Because they basically, if they lost a land battle that was stopping an enemy army from entering Laconia, their capital had no defenses. That was like part of their national identity, was they have to have this strong army to protect their lands because they don't have walls doing it. Otherwise, things on this map are, they have the typical Total War, you know, inaccuracies. Also, Rhodos, like I said before, should be renamed to, what did I say it was? Ephilos? I don't remember exactly what the name was, but you get the idea. So, overall, this map, although it has a number of bewildering issues, is better than Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I mean, the AC Odyssey map is so detailed and dense in stuff. You may be thinking, that's not fair at all. AC Odyssey has some issues, but it's not that inaccurate. Oh boy, I'm excited to show AC Odyssey and really just rip into that one, because that one has not just the map, but everything in that game has serious accuracy problems. But okay, I think that basically is a good stopping point for my roast of this campaign. Hope you appreciated this video. I thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think of this kind of video. I know it's kind of more freeform and off the cuff, but I think this was kind of fun. And like I was trying to say earlier before the goofy intro cinematic interrupted me, I appreciate this campaign. This was my first experience as a gamer with the Peloponnesian War, and I do think that's meaningful. And I don't want to just, like, I know this video is overwhelmingly very negative and funny, but I do like that this campaign exists. I think it does have a number of issues. Some of these can honestly be fixed by just changing some names, but at the end of the day, it's nice that this experience exists, and I hope that my mod Hegemony is a natural evolution and improvement and succession on the experience this campaign created for a lot of us, you know, back in the day. So thank you also, on the more positive note, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.